Alas, Christopher Nolan's much awaited Odyssey trailer has finally arrived, and I too have had the pleasure, or misfortune, of stumbling upon it. While it's completely pointless to demand historical accuracy, especially from an adaptation of a semi mythological poem, I couldn't help but notice something rather odd. So I looked again and again and again. And all the time I was wondering what exactly I'm looking at. Because this is a Viking ship. It has to be a Viking ship. It looks like a Viking ship. So after 5 minutes dig on Google, I found the photos from the set. And yeah, the ship they used to depict a Bronze Age ship from the Mediterranean is in fact the reconstructed longboat Harald Fairhair, Harald Hårfagre, that sailed in 2016 from Norway to Canada and then further to New York and Chicago. So, the largest contemporary Viking vessel. And they used it to depict a ship from ancient Greece, because why not? So I think at this point we all understand the concept of artistic license and that the Odyssey is itself a tale with loads of supernatural elements. But at the same time, for a story to function, although it is a retelling, I do think it needs at least a minimum of coherence and consistency in its format and world building. So I'm sorry to say this, but this is just lazy. I mean, you had a gargantuan budget to make this film. You could at least hired some experts to at least shape the basic form, and then I cannot believe I'm actually saying this, but modify it a bit, maybe using CGI. Or if you really wanted the Viking ship because it sends off battle vibes or whatever, try to make it somehow look less recognizable, because that is the main problem. It is too recognizable, at least to a partially educated audience. This is exactly what bothers me. Films nowadays are really trying to dumb down the audience, and there's really no other way to put it. Of course, a trireme would have been 1,000 times preferable to this, although that is anachronistic too. But the Homeric poems were written centuries after the events they describe, so we're dealing with stories that circulated orally for a very long time, as means that people in ancient Greece would also have perceived the Bronze Age as this distant past and would have had a very rough time relating to certain elements. So a lot of the poem would have been influenced by the current state of affairs. The film Troy, the 2004 Swords and Sandals flick, has also been heavily criticized because it really is a giant mashup of anachronisms and influences. However, it does deliver, in my opinion, some acceptable storytelling, and I really like the production design. That wasn't really bad. I mean, at least if we look at the fleet, I almost said Viking here. See what I mean? The fleet of Greek ships, they contain variations of triremes. So this is in fact possible. Viking and Greek ships do share some similarities in design, but they're also very, very different. The longships have a shallow draft. They're very close to the waterline. They have a wide hull. There's no elevated deck or ram at the bow. The Viking ships, they were made to handle shallow rivers. The Greek ships, on the other hand, had this very prominent cutwater in front because they were also used to smash enemy ships, something that Viking ships did not do. The building techniques would have also been very different. Greek ships were not built using clinker technique. They were built using mortise and tenon joinery. This was used to join planks edge to edge. This means mortises were cut into the edges of adjacent planks, and then separate wooden tenons were inserted between the planks, and the tenons were often pegged in place with wooden dowels driven through the planks and tenon. Now, this might seem irrelevant, but I just felt the need to clarify it. This produced a rigid shell-first hull where the planking itself carried much of the structural load. Alternatively, Odysseus might have used doweled and laced construction with pegs that further secured the planks, but typically without a full mortise and tenon socket. Instead, lacings or cords were used to tie the planks together through holes near the edges. So Homer himself might have been anachronistic. At any rate, the point is, this is not clinker planking, and even without that kind of historical knowledge, you can still tell there is something off about that ship. But then again, if your cinematic lighting is dark enough, which seems to be another plague of our ages, they might actually get away with it. The amount of people saying it's just a movie has also begun to bother me. We should have standards for movies. You should be able to criticize film companies that simply refuse to produce quality material. That a multi-million dollar movie project with almost infinite resources simply refuses to put the effort into making something that looks at least somewhat researched with a cultural impact rather than vomiting out trash to generate profit is something that should be criticized. Yeah, so if it doesn't matter, you might as well have the hoplites on the bloody Titanic. A fun fact, the Titanic is actually closer in time to Viking ships than Viking ships are to Bronze Age Greece. So if you take up the task of retelling one of the most important stories ever written and plaster advertisements all over the place for over a year, then yeah, you should expect criticism. Yes, it is a mythological story, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be culturally coherent. Doesn't mean it shouldn't imbue the set with a sense of contextual realism. I really hope the film is better than the trailer, honestly, because all in all, besides the Viking ship thing, it looks to me very generic and bland. Not to mention this thing that has been the mockery of social media for the past week, and, well, for good reason, probably didn't want to throw away the Batman gear. So, in other words, this conversation is not about historical accuracy. It would be completely pointless, as I already mentioned, but what should we call it? Aesthetic consistency, I think, would be a good concept. The style to me is all over the place. Like, I'm watching it and expecting to see Legolas burst out of the woods anytime, or this Agamemnon character pick up a lightsaber. So, what do you think? Am I being over the top here? Have you seen the trailer? Just let me know what you think. Don't go just yet, I do have a bonus. The Odyssey does describe the boat he builds, but with very vague technical detail. The scholarly debate about the exact type of vessel stems from a couple of verbs used to infer construction, like to bind, and also archaeological parallels. So have a look yourself at the description. Odysseus made a giant raft as wide as the broad hull of a large cargo ship, traced out by someone very skilled in carpentry. Then he worked to fasten the deck, attaching it onto the close-set timbers, and then finished it with extended gunnels. Next, he set up a mast with a yarn dam fastened to it, and then carved out a steering oar to guide the raft. From stem to stern, he wove a lattice of willow reeds reinforced with wood to protect him from the waves. Calypso, the enchanting goddess, brought him woven linen to make a sail, which he did very skillfully. On it he tied bracing ropes and sheets and halyards. Then he levered the raft down to the shining sea.